What's up, guys? Welcome back to another TSU Newsdesk. This show is going to be mostly baseball related, not a lot of other news coming from any of the major sports leagues. We have the draft, we have some Cora comments to talk about, and some more arguments between Major League Baseball and the Players Union. So the first thing I want to talk about is Cora's comments. So Cora, I guess, really had his first talking or interview since the whole thing went down with the cheating scandal that ultimately got him fired and suspended for the rest of the season. I think it's still 2021. He basically commented saying that it wasn't only a two-man game. The report and really everything that's been reported on is saying that it was mostly him and Carlos Beltran, who was their main DH during that season with the Astros. But he went on to say that basically everyone was doing it. It wasn't only him and Carlos Beltran. He did want to reaffirm that he takes full responsibility for what he did. The next thing I want to talk about is more arguments between the Players Union and baseball. So basically, we've talked about last week, I gave a little timeline about all the disagreements that's been going on and them trying to finally come to an agreement about when baseball is going to actually start again. And for this week, nothing else has changed. There's still back and forth. The most recent proposal was made by baseball. They called for a 76-game season where players would get a 75% of their prorated salaries. Once again, not the full prorated salaries. This has been, the prorated salary situation has been the constant marker in these discussions, or if you want to call them arguments, because they agreed to the prorated salaries, but baseball can't pay them anymore. There's a lot of other little things that was involved in that deal that I don't think are necessary to really talk about. But basically, it's still about the prorated salaries, and there's still a lot of problems in them trying to come to an agreement. The next thing I want to talk about is the draft. So the draft concluded, let's just say earlier in the week, and it was only 5 rounds. They had condensed it from 40 to 5 rounds because of the coronavirus, and also it was remote, so it was similar to how the NFL went about doing their draft. So I'm going to talk about the first 5 picks, then I'm going to talk about the winner and loser of the draft, the team that I think had the best prospect haul and the team that I think had the worst. So, picks 1 through 5. First pick was for the Detroit Tigers. They picked Spencer Torkelson, a first baseman out of Arizona State. Interesting with him, they announced him as a third baseman, so it seems like the Tigers are going to use him as a third baseman. Obviously, there's a lot of time between he is put in the minor league system to actually getting to the major league system, so I'm sure it's going to be third baseman, first baseman, stuff like that. He is known for his power bat, really powerful hitter, and the Tigers really liked him at the number 1 spot. The second pick was by the Baltimore Orioles. They picked Heston Kjerstad. I got that wrong, sorry. Right fielder out of Arkansas. He's a corner outfielder with a lot of power. This was probably more of a best fit for the Orioles, who also had the number 30 pick. So they wanted to try and have enough money to pay their number 2 pick and their number 30 pick. So they picked a little below slot value. So let me explain what slot value really means. So let's say at the number 2 pick, a player is usually worth $2 million. I don't know if that's true, but let's just use that for argument's sake. Let's say the player's worth $2 million. They're going to pick a little below slot value. They're going to pick a player that maybe is worth $1.75 million, and that's what they're going to sign him for. So they have another $0.25 million to hopefully go and sign their number 30 pick. So they picked Heston as he's likely to take less money than a usual number 2 overall pick, and that allowed them to take a really good number 30 pick. And he's another power bat, very similar to Torkelson in that stance, except his defense isn't really there. They're expecting him to probably be a DH for them and hoping that he can be on top of the MLB home run leaderboards when he finally makes it to the majors. The third overall pick was made by the Marlins. Max Meyer, right-handed pitcher out of Minnesota, the first pitcher taken in the 2020 draft. His stuff hits triple digits, throws hard, and if you can throw hard, you can be effective. And that's really what they liked about him. His durability is in question, though, because a couple reasons. First off, he throws hard, and we've seen that pitchers can go down with Tommy John surgery, are more likely to go down with Tommy John surgery if they throw harder. and he's also started with Minnesota as a bullpen pitcher, not a starter. The Marlins want to form him into a starter, and they're hoping they can, but if the durability doesn't last, he can be an elite back-end guy. The next pick was made by the Kansas City Royals. They picked Asa Lacy, who's a left-handed pitcher out of Texas A&M. Many consider him better than Max Meyer, but between third and fourth, there's not that much difference. He's another hard-throwing pitcher, has a lot of great stuff. If you have a lot of great stuff, similar to if you can throw hard, it really plays well in any system. For him, the biggest problem is control, and they're hoping throughout his minors they can fix that. The fifth pick, the last pick I'm going to talk about, was made by the Toronto Blue Jays in Austin Martin, who's a third baseman. He can play all over the diamond, which is perfect for the Blue Jays. He's not only a third baseman. You know, with the Blue Jays, their infield is starting to get filled up with young talent. Vladimir Guerrero, Bichette. They have a lot of young talent there, but the fact that Martin can play all over the infield is perfect for the versatility of the Blue Jays infield. He's known offensively for his contact, approach, and plate discipline, so if you're a Mets fan out there, very similar to Brandon Nimmo, someone like that, really good at plate discipline, really good at contact. Those are all the players I'm going to talk about specifically. Now I'm going to go into the winners and losers, at least in my opinion, of the 2020 MLB draft. I'm going to start with the winner. It's going to sound biased, but it's not. I think the Mets had the best prospect haul of any team. It was between the Mets and the Cardinals, but I'm going to go with the Mets. Their first pick was, it's really focused around their first three picks because their last two picks were to compensate to be able to pay one of the players, but I'm going to get into that. So their first pick was Pete Crow Armstrong, an outfielder out of high school. So he's a really standout talent offensively, but even more defensively. The offense is nothing to belittle, but he is really good defensively. In my opinion, what I've been reading about him reminds me of Juan Lagares defensively. Center field, a great center fielder. It seems that Pete Crow Armstrong has that Lagares didn't have is offensive talent. He was like a perfect fit for them because coming in the 19th hole, first off, he seemed to be like somewhat a steal for the Mets, and they needed a center field prospect really badly. I don't even know who their best center field prospect was, but it was no one good. So they really filled that hole in the first round. The next pick for them was JT Ginn. He's a hard-throwing right-handed pitcher. He was drafted 2 years ago by the Dodgers in the first round, but he felt that he could even go higher, so he went to college to prove that. Unfortunately, he had Tommy John surgery this March, so he was picked in the second round by the Mets. And in my opinion, if he didn't have Tommy John surgery, he could be a top 15 pick. And there's a lot of risk there with JT Ginn because of his past. We don't know if he's going to want to sign, but in my opinion, I think he is going to sign because he just had Tommy John surgery, and this is his best chance to go pro because would you want to risk having a bad season and going even lower down on the draft next year? And there's a tremendous amount of upside for him because of the simple fact that people are down on him because he had Tommy John surgery, but you've seen over and over again, specifically with the Mets, that pitchers can come back from Tommy John surgery and pitch even better than they did before. So there's a lot of upside there with JT Ginn. The last player I want to talk about is Isaiah Green, who was their third pick. He's another outfielder. They simply picked him because he was a tremendous steal for them. Another great offense and defensive-minded player. Very similar to Pete Crow Armstrong, but I guess he was their third pick, so a notch down from Pete Crow Armstrong, but that doesn't mean he can't form into a really good player. He is another player that has tremendous upside. Those three players and the other players they picked, which I'm not going to get into, really, I think, refueled their farm system that had been not there for the past few years because of the trades that have went down. And the loser, in my opinion, of the draft was really between the Red Sox and the Yankees. I'm going to go with the Red Sox. I think it mainly had to go to the simple fact that they lost out on their second round pick this year because of the 2018 sign stealing scandal in a draft that had already been 40 rounds to 5 rounds. They only had 4 picks instead of the usual 40 picks, or let's say they had lost 39 picks. So they had to take full advantage of that, and I don't really think they did, and I think it's because a lot of their picks were dependent on them losing out on their second round pick. So their first pick was Nick York, who's a second baseman. He's mainly an offensive talent. His defense is there, but it's not that great, and they think he could maybe be a DH for them. I think his defensive skills could definitely increase throughout the minor league system and could play well for the Red Sox, but it's really his offensive talent, which is why they picked him. They also need a second baseman, so it kind of works out there, but his defensive skills are nothing to really talk about. He wasn't on a lot of people's top 100 prospects for this draft, which is surprising that they took him in the first round, 17th overall pick. However, they had to take him in the first round because they didn't think he would be available in the third round. That's because they didn't have a second round pick. He probably would have been available in the second round, but because they lost out on their second round pick because of the sign stealing scandal, they had to basically waste their first round pick to get Nick York, who could have been available in the second round. Then we skip over the second round, jump, I think it's 72 slots ahead to their third round pick, who ended up being Blaze Jordan, who I think was their best pick of the night. He's an offensive juggernaut, really more on the power side. He's a really powerful player, and for the Red Sox could be another DH option. And I think he was their best pick because in his graduating class, he's the #1 overall prospect, but he was obviously dropped down a little bit because he was moving up. They were able to draft him in the third round when, let's say, maybe in a couple years, you might have to use a first round pick to get him. So I think the risk reward there, the reward's all there. So I'm going to say that the Red Sox ended up being the loser because they had to be dependent on that second round pick being lost, and their first overall pick, one of 4 picks, wasn't really the best pick to be made at that spot. So now I want to jump into the opinion corner. Not a lot to talk about opinion-wise, but I do have some comments. The first thing I want to talk about is Alex Cora's comments. I kind of agree with him in the sense that it definitely wasn't only a 2-man job. I think they had the biggest roles in it, which I think the report kind of cleared up and what's been talked about. But because they had the 2 biggest roles, that's really all anyone's talking about. And they're not really focusing on how everyone was really involved. So I do kind of see what Alex Cora is saying. I am happy that it wasn't like an interview where he's like saying, I'm innocent, there was no reason to suspend me and stuff like that. And that it was really all focused around him taking full responsibility for it, but also people to understand that it wasn't only him and Carlos Beltran. The last thing I want to talk about, mainly the Mets, because you guys know I'm a Mets fan and this is my opinion corner, so I'm going to talk about it. I'm really excited with who they got. I think it could be shown through the fact that I thought they had the best overall prospect haul, but that's not only me. One of the people I saw, CBS Sports, said they had one of the best. So it's definitely not a biased opinion, unless CBS Sports is run by a Mets fan, but I don't know about that. I'm really excited that they went, it seems like, real batter heavy, and it wasn't only focused around pitching, because previous to Bertie Van Wagenen, all they were going after was pitchers. I mean, it showed with the talent that they had on the pitching end, but what also shows is that the pitching got them into one playoffs. That doesn't mean that it's not going to help them in the future, but I think the Cubs back in, when did they win their World Series? Cubs from like 2014 to 2016, that's what I want the Mets to be, but I think they could even be better if they can focus around their offense and have that pitching with Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard. We don't know how much he's going to play next season. Steven Matz, Marcus Stroman, they have great pitchers, and if they can have really good hitters like the Cubs had in 2016, I guess we can call it, their team could be really good. And you can look at the Mets offense right now. It's pretty much stacked, and they got lucky with Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil, but the fact that they're still going after offensive-minded players really shows me that they're trying to change it up a little bit, and I'm happy about that because I wanted them to go offensive-focused, because it seemed like going pitcher-focused had the right idea on paper, but pitchers are so fickle between playing season to season but also getting injured. It's hard to really grow a team around that, but I think hitters are more consistent with their abilities, and if you can get good hitters, that can prove really fruitful in the future for them. But that's really it for this week's TSU Newsdesk. Thanks for watching. Mainly baseball focused. Not a lot of other things going on this week. But that's really it. See you next time.